Saw a video the other day from Cali Effect talking about why everybody hates link monsters, but the truth be told, they actually aren't hated. At least they weren't at first. And I would argue that they still kind of aren't, but it's due to power creep that has just changed everything. Let's dive on into it, shall we? Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is your host with the most, Avery LR32 here. I've noticed that a lot of people on the interwebs don't know how to pronounce that. It's Avery LR32, but some people think Avery is how you pronounce it. Ladies and gentlemen, we're trying to climb on up to the 1600 ladder. Destroy the everything boo-boo stain off that like and subscribe button so that we can get there. Hope you all having a fantastic week. Happy almost New Year. So let's just dive right on into it. I saw a video the other day from Cali Effect talking about how everybody just hates link monsters now and the evolution of what has happened over the years since we got link summoning, which has been around for several years now, which is really crazy to think about. But link monsters starting out, and I believe he mentioned this at the beginning of the video, talking about how it was a way to slow down the game. And a lot of people, myself included, thought it would slow down the game. I made a video on Capital G's video that is actually still there. It got like 15,000 views, and a lot of people liked it because of what I said in the video. But I talked about decks that were going to be able to compete at the time because of the fact of how much link monsters were going to slow down the game. And I talked about things like Sylvans and other decks that were good at the time. I mean, we're talking really old decks. Like, these were decks that could actually kind of see play at the time. But one of them was Sylvans. Everybody fell in love with the fact that, like, I was talking about Sylvans because everybody just, like, I don't know, fell in love with that deck for some reason, even though it's complicated AF. But it was a way to try and slow down the game. At least that's what it was advertised as, because pendulums, whatever you may think of pendulums, when, especially hindsight being 2020, were an absolute mistake to the game, and Konami realized that, which is why they changed how the pendulum mechanic as a whole worked. Instead of having two scales that were in their own zones but were still treated as spell card zones or whatever it was, now they moved them to the far left and right back row. You know, that hurt pendulums a lot, because now you not only had the 5 back row plus the 2 scales. Basically, you just had an advantage over every deck in the game because you had 2 extra zones to work with plus your 5 back row. In that sense, it was just such a mistake how they implemented it into the game. And I would argue to this day, it's the mechanic they want you to forget about. Like, it's a mechanic that it's just, they don't want you playing it. That's why Electromite's banned. That's why they honestly don't print a lot of pendulum support, but they slowly bring back things like Monkey Board, Skull Crobat Joker, things like that, right? Because the deck was just absolutely insane. And now we have link summoning, and we've had it for several years. Some people have said that we need like a rule change, we need a new summoning mechanic. A lot of people, myself included, don't want that. But I would argue even today, with the mistakes that Konami has made with link summoning along the way, I like to think that they never intend for a tier 0 deck to come about or for a tier 0 format to occur, unless they just have some sort of warped sense of an idea of what constitutes as a tier 0 deck. You know, maybe to this day they don't see Spiral and Goki as a tier 0 deck, which would just be outrageous. But I mean, this is fucking Konami we're talking about. So you can go to a regional and get yourself an air fryer. As long as it's Core TCG hosting the regional, you can get yourself an $80 air fryer that Konami may or may not be paying for. So besides the point, you know, don't put no shit by them. But yes, they've made mistakes with things like Goki and making things like, these are more exceeds, but because of the card pool that's available with links, Trigate Wizard, Utopic Zexal, Azathoth, Rongo Bongo, and the reason why I mention things that aren't links is because these things came about because of the link mechanic. You look at Spiral being tier 0, that was a rogue deck at best, and then they got Double Helix and it was like, this deck's insane. And now what's funny is that you can still technically play Spiral in 2024, soon to be 2025, but anyone will tell you, you just ash the Double Helix and you win. Like, Spiral is the epitome of a deck that's good and dies to one-hand trap. That being, you ash the Double Helix or just negate the Double Helix in some way, shape, or form. And so now that we're arriving into 2024, soon to be 2025, I don't feel like it's links that are the issue that the majority of players hate, right? I feel like the majority of players are tired of the power creep that was somewhat caused by links, more because of the fact that when they did the 2020 adjusted rule change where you only had to summon link monsters to the extra monster zone, and then, pendulums that are face up in the extra deck to the extra monster zone, and everything else could go in the main monster zone, that kind of opened the floodgates back up to the power creep, if you think about it. And also, this is in no way a shot at Cali Effect. I don't know why I have to fucking say that, but this is the internet. Someone's going to get a giant piece of splinter in their jimmies and come after me and throw the fucking air fryer that they just won at my head. I love joking about that. But again, I don't think that links are overall the issue. When you look at the decks that have done well since the adjusted rule change in 2019/2020, we have gotten good formats. And Cali Effect did mention this with things like Toss format. 2019 had link monsters, and it was a fun control format. And I like to think that we're going back to that kind of idea or era into 2025 with Rizal, Malice, and a couple other decks, since Rizal is more of like a control/stun-ish deck. But we have had good formats over that time, such as Toss. We've had decks that have done well that haven't necessarily just been link decks. Whether it's been Base, still the dumbest name for a deck I've ever heard, aka Badass Sexy Engine. We have more stun decks like Runic that aren't necessarily link decks. They're mostly fusions. Branded, which is a fusion deck. And so all of this to say that links, especially with the 2020 adjusted rule set change, is really what made power creep more and more insane. There have been broken link monsters, don't get me wrong. We've got Auroradon, Link Karibo, more because it was an extender of sorts, Link Cross, Hauki Fibrax. We've had these busted things, right? But outside of, if you're looking at just links specifically, outside of Spiral, which was a link deck, Goki to a lesser extent, because I would say it was more them being able to U-link you, but then they also evolved and became Rongo Bongo the deck. At first, they were kind of a link deck because, especially with the U-linking mechanic, it was absurd. And so I feel like it was with Goki U-linking that kind of gave the Konami the idea of, okay, players hate this rule change because they can't play the role decks. Let's change up the rules, and then that way if you get U-linked, you don't just auto-lose the game. And so I think that overall, it's the power creep as a whole that makes people hate where this game has gone. And especially, too, someone said this on one of my videos a few days ago, or maybe last week or something, and they said that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has always been bad, but with the rise of social media, it's given people more of a voice to complain. And that's partially true. Yu-Gi-Oh! Hasn't always been a bad game. I tell people this all the time, and I've even said this in some of my retrospective videos, I believe. Shameless plug to that playlist on the channel. You can go and see all the old formats I've talked about. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Was not always, forever and ever until the end of time, going to be like 2005 GOAT format. If it still was, the game, I would argue, would be dead. If you did not evolve the game, if you did not give it something fresh, a new coat of paint, it was going to die off eventually for one reason or another. And so, are links something that should have been introduced to the game? I think that had they not had the massive rule change where basically every old deck was just dead in the water because you had to summon something to the extra monster zone, I think that turned a lot of players off. And I think that even once they put out the adjusted rule change, once we've had all these insanely powerful link monsters, specifically they have created tier 0 formats with Goki U-linking, but then evolving and becoming basically an Exceed deck with fucking Rongo Bongo, and then Spiral Double Helix just making a deck insane. Having things like that in the game made it not healthy. At the same time, having that control factor, having that lever, I guess, for lack of a better term, that you can kind of control things because of the extra monster zone, I think is really smart. And I think it's something that would probably require a ban list, but making archetypes that are, I would argue, more like Rizal, that in a vacuum are control based, is what can make the game feel more enjoyable because it's not just break my board. You know, I'm sure some people are going to say, well, Avery Ryzal's combo heavy because they can play Fiendsmith, they can play Bysteals, they can play this and blah, 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 blah. But think about what you just said. It's the power creep generic ass cards that make it even more explosive. If you subtract Fiendsmith, Bysteal, even go a step further, Adventure, just generic things out of the equation, and you play a pure Ryzal deck like what they do in the OCG and what some players have done here in the TCG, it's a control deck. That's all that is. You get insulated from Nibiru by activating Ryzal Cross with Duo Drive having one material. That's it. And at most, you're ending on a Detonator with maybe a Baguska or a Dweller. And Baguska doesn't hurt Link monsters. You can out it with a Little Knight. I would rather deal with a Baguska plus Detonator with like maybe an Imperm in the back row or hand traps than deal with Savage Dragon, Baron, Auroradon making tokens, Link Cross, Hauki Fibrax, Artifact Scythe just locking me out of the game, and Floodgates. That sounds way more healthier to me dealing with Ryzal than it does dealing with just breaking a board that you maybe can't because, I don't know, they activated an anti-spell, summon limit. Maybe they skill drained you because they're, I don't know, a trash stun player. But guys, that's just my thoughts. I've been around the game for over a decade. I've seen formats come and go. And that's why I'm actually really enjoying this new format because it's not just break my board or herk-a-derp-a-derp. It's more like, hey, you got to have to play a little bit more smart. You got to play your hand traps here and there. You're not just going to be able to link climb your way into a U-Link board that you can't do anything with because you can only summon to the extra monster zone. That's why I think that the adjusted rule change has helped a lot. Konami needs to wheel back the power creep. They need to wheel back these generic engines like Fiendsmith and Bysteal and other things we've seen in the past, like, you know, Adventure, or even generic Link monsters like what we had in Verte Anaconda, where anyone could crap out a Dragoons and just be like, hey, bro, you go and finish that pizza. So, guys, let me know what you think down in the comments below. I thought Cali Effect made a really great video on it. Be sure to go check it out. And like I said, I posted on Capital G's channel years ago. If you want to go see what I initially thought about Links, go check out that video as well. Just go to his channel and in the little search bar, just type in AveryLR32. I'm sure you'll find it. Guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.